Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Panel on the 30th of October 2025. I am Councillor Anderson and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. The first item on our agenda is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Rickman, who's been substituted by Councillor Bannister. I've also received apologies from Councillor Foreman. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Dan? That's an apology for Councillor Nunn. Just a reminder to switch your microphones on when speaking. Okay, item 2, declarations of members' interests. Is there any interest that any member wishes to declare? Councillor King?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. So, can you hear me okay? So I think I should declare that I have an interest in that. I'm obviously a county councillor, but I'm also chairman of the Leicestershire Local Pension Committee, which administers the LGPF scheme for LLR at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Any other interest to declare? Okay, item 3 on the agenda, the draft minutes of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Panel on the 16th of April 2025. Is the panel in agreement that the minutes of this of that particular meeting are an accurate record of the meeting and can be signed as a true record? Does that mean I can sign them if there's no...
There's no dissent?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, item 4, draft submission proposal for local government reorganisation in Leicestershire. I will now invite Councillor Knowles to present the report as the relevant portfolio holder. After he has spoken, I understand that our Chief Executive, John Richardson, and one of the finance leads for the proposal, Andy Wood, will be providing a presentation to us. So over to you, Councillor Knowles.
Well, thank you, Chairman. This is a job which is fallen to leaders across the council, across the county, to actually make this presentation of the document, which is headed up North, City, South, big enough to deliver, close enough to respond. And I believe, Chairman, it's a document we can be very proud of. We're doing exactly what we promised. We're consulting, and this is also evidenced and underpinned by the fact that we have thousands of people whose comments are listed within this document and which has influenced a lot of the information that's included. We're listening. We're here tonight to listen, to hear the views of fellow members, which is vitally important, and to ensure that every member has the opportunity to have their say. I would say, Chairman, don't underestimate the work that has gone into this, both from officers and members. It hasn't been easy. And whilst I thank the officers for their patience, and believe me, they've needed a lot of it over the past number of months, I would pay a heartfelt tribute to all the leaders from a wide variety of political backgrounds who've left politics at the door and looked to deliver not only for their particular districts and boroughs, but for the whole of Leicestershire. This document offers a sustainable package to look after and provide for our community, for this generation and for generations to come. But as importantly, it protects the whole of Leicestershire. We care about the community, we care about our staff, and we must deliver for all of them. Our council in Harborough is not broken. I've made that case directly to government ministers. But the die is cast. The government want the change. They intend to push forward with the change, and we have to play with the cards that we've been dealt. We've indicated within the document savings of between 40 and 50 million pounds. We've presented how this can be achieved. We have a structured plan to deliver for services. The future, though we appreciate this can only be the base for the future, as the incoming new administration, whatever that may be, or the new authority, will be actually the authority that makes the decision as to how that is accounted for and how it is administered. So we do appreciate that what we're putting forward here is, if you like, the foundations upon which this will be built. Over the past months, I have met both the leader at the county and the Mayor of Leicester, and I have been happy to take our proposals to their doorsteps. I've offered to debate the substance of our offer with them and to do the same on their ideas. Neither took up the offer. The North City South Group has tried to engage to seek collaborative working with both the city and county, but sadly the flow on this was all but in one direction. So I think that is a point that we do need to make, that we have tried to collaborate. We couldn't wait. The responsibility was and is far too important, so we had to move on. I've been accused of horse trading parts of harbour into the city under this plan, and I've been accused of doing this in smoke-filled rooms, dark rooms, rooms of every colour, every sort, and wherever up and down the whole of the district. That's never been the intention. We have never once conceded any part of harbour should be traded into the city. There is no part of harbour moving forward. The city boundary is fixed, and this is exactly what I've said 101 times, that I wanted to protect harbour. The community on the edge of harbour said no, and I said no. Our members of Parliament said no, and we as a group of leaders are recommending to you exactly the same in this document. Say no to the city expansion, protect our districts and deliver for the future. You will be protecting the whole of our community. The numbers add up. The three unitaries are numerically balanced on population and financially viable, and the information is there, and we are prepared to answer and assist with anything we can to sort of validate that. This document isn't perfect. You received it 10 days ago, complete with typos and all, but it was important to get this document to you. You received the full slideshow, I think, this morning, and you received all the appendices, etc., that accommodate and support this document, again, a number of days ago. Sadly, the county couldn't match this. Their document has yet to be delivered. Our case is on the table. All comments tonight will help improve the document. Though North City South is already going through a number of scrutiny panels, my understanding is it actually went to North West Leicestershire's cabinet last night, and they've already approved it. So it has been through their processes and been supported unanimously. This document proves to be a pathway to a local authority big enough to deliver and close enough to respond. There is a big job ahead of us. We fully appreciate that. And I hope that tonight you'll take the opportunity to put on the table your views, because importantly, that's what tonight is all about, that individual members' views are put forward, questions raised that will help us to improve the document. And with that, Chairman, I hand back to you.
Thank you. I believe that's over to you then, John.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Leader. Okay, just as the slides are loaded up, I'll just run through a few comments. Firstly, you've all had the slide pack. They came out this morning and we wanted to give you a chance to look at those. So I'm going to run through the first 10 slides, but I'll do that quite briefly for two reasons. One, because you've already got them, you've seen them, so I don't need to spend too much time, but I will use it to set the scene for any that haven't had a chance to look at them today. Second point is we have Andy Woods online on screen, and he's going to then run through the next set of slides, the finance slides. We only have Andy for a short amount of time, as he's going to dip out as soon as he's answered our questions and your questions to go into Melton's scrutiny, which has started at the same time as ours tonight. But their LGR is second on the agenda. So we do need to get through all of the finance questions as soon as we can tonight to allow Andy to move on. Okay, So yeah, just to reiterate a few points, the slides are up now, which is good, but this is a draft. As the leader has said, it does have typos. There are bits that aren't correct. They are being picked up daily. Our comms group are working through it page by page and are taking note and improving all of those as we go. So apologies if you have spotted them. We have captured them, I can assure you, and they are being worked on. So please don't feel you need to mention those tonight. This is also, I think, the 6th scrutiny meeting of the 8 authorities, and also County had their scrutiny yesterday. So points have been raised in all of those scrutiny sessions. They've all been captured and they're all being fed into the working groups and steering groups to make improvements as we go. So I can assure you that even the County's comments yesterday are all being captured and taken forward into our working groups. I think the third point I just want to raise is that this is a once in a lifetime, maybe once in a generation opportunity. Harbour District Council has lasted 50 years. You all know that. We don't know how long new authorities will last, but I think we have to assume that it's going to be here for a period of time. So our proposal is different. It is trying to be innovative, and it is not just merge councils together, reduce costs and carry on as we were before, because that doesn't change the increasing cost that we're all seeing to adult and social care year in, year out. This is different. This is trying to make a fundamental change to the system in Leicestershire. Okay, and you'll hear more about that when we get into the neighbourhood working and the neighbourhood development proposals later. This is, investing in our residents' lives for the future, but not doing the same that we've always done. This is trying to do things differently to break that cycle. Okay, so finally, I think I just want to mention that we do have Liz here, and you all know Liz. And Liz has lived experience of local government reorganisation. She's been through it in Northamptonshire, and she can talk very eloquently about what happened there. So that's a real plus for us that you can draw on tonight, and we will draw on tonight to explain some of the systems and processes that do go on through that lived experience. So thanks to Liz. You do have other officers here as well, because we've all been involved in various different working groups and steering committees. Okay, so we'll draw on all of us tonight to answer the questions at different times. Okay, so let's move on to the slides quickly, so I can whiz through these and we can get to Andy on the finance. So if you, Cameron, can move the slides on as I talk. So on to the next slide. Shouting a bit too loud, maybe. Apologies for that. Okay, while they figure out the movement of slide, for those that have got them in front of you, you'll see that the proposal slide, which gives the summary and gives the headline messages that we've been using in our comms. 3 equally sized councils, you all know that's been the proposal from day one in terms of balance, and the leaders mentioned they're all broadly 400,000 each in population size. You'll be aware that the guiding principle from government was 500,000. Clearly, we're well aware of that, but there has been clarification since then from government ministers, and where there is, not to say exceptional circumstances, but where there is justification, they can be above 350,000, as long as we set out our justification and clear rationale for that, which clearly we will be doing, and part of that is around devolution, and we'll come on to that further. So 3 equally sized councils, delivering devolution at pace. This is clearly what certainly our businesses want, and our proposal makes that happen through the combined authority, the mayoral strategic authority, with elections in 2027. We feel that is doable and achievable, and that will deliver funding infrastructure into Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland at pace, and that's what our businesses across the whole of the county are telling us. They're feeling that they're missing out, as other areas are getting that infrastructure funding through devolution. Leicestershire isn't. That's putting them at a disadvantage. We're losing that growth opportunity, we're losing that prosperity opportunity, and our businesses are feeling let down because of that. So this proposal will unlock devolution, and it will unlock it quickly. Accelerating economic growth. You'll hear more about that again later. 3 distinct areas. We'll have 3 distinct services that focus on economic development. That gives greater knowledge, involvement and focus on our key assets and economic assets in each of the 3 areas. And by having that focus, it can deliver at pace and can deliver jobs and growth. And we'll come on to that in a little bit. Saving 44 million, you've already heard that mentioned, and that's been part of our comms. All of that will be explained, and Andy can talk more about that, so I won't cover that in too much detail. Sustainable prevention savings, I've mentioned that briefly already, around our prevention-focused approach, bringing interventions into localities, into communities in a more multi-agency, joined-up way than has been done currently. We're not saying it doesn't happen now, but we're saying we can do that at scale, at pace, in localities. And we will explain a little bit more about that as we go through the night. And the final thing that, again, the leader has mentioned, the proposal retains the existing boundaries. There is no change that we're proposing to any local authority, and especially the city boundary. Okay, if we can move on, please, Cameron. Our proposal has been based on 6 guiding principles, and you'll see that on the slides for those that have them, so I won't run through and just talk to them because I think they're pretty self-explanatory. So you'll see those on that slide, but they're the guiding principles that we've used in developing the proposal. If we move on, please, Cameron. Devolution and economic growth, I've covered some of this already. The 3 well-balanced unitary councils, it fits with a mayoral strategic authority above it. So 3 units of 400,000 with a mayoral strategic authority of 1.2 million people above it. That is a nice and equally balanced fit and is logical and makes sense. And it, this the whole local government reorganisation came from the English devolution bill. This was about devolution at the start. So that's why we feel devolution is important. I've mentioned already about getting funding into the area, but this came from a devolution bill. That was the intent at the start. So the mayoral elections in 2027 will bring that forward and deliver that for us. And I've mentioned already about what it can bring, but the last 2 bullet points there will bring that home, and we can talk a bit more about that later, and Andy certainly can from a financial perspective. But it supports the creating of 219,000 new jobs by 2050, and that's through greater focus on the economic assets that we have in each of the areas that are being proposed. And that ultimately has been modelled that it can, by the Oxford economics model that pulled this together for us, that can generate an extra 8 billion for the public purse by 2050, thanks to that business growth. But that can only be done through devolution, only done through that increased infrastructure and transport and funding in investment, and through greater focus. Okay, move on, please, Cameron. Moving on to democracy, you'll all have seen the proposals in terms of what the population sizes are and what that means for councillors, and the numbers per resident there and the ratios are explained. Clearly, what it means is a significant drop in councillor numbers, almost half. So that means you're going to have increased resident numbers from where you are now, and it increased caseworkers. The unitary has a greater breadth of services than district members have now. That's an inevitability of the proposal, all proposals, but that's what this model is suggesting. So you'll see the numbers there, broadly 4,000 residents per councillor. Okay, and in the south, which clearly you're interested in, you'll see the ratio there, and we're proposing 70 councillors. The wards haven't been mapped out yet, so we haven't got that mapped on a map, so we can't tell you the exact boundaries for all of that, but you can see the numbers and the ratio that are proposed. Okay, Cameron, if we can move on again, please. A little bit more about the neighbourhood prevention model. It is about early intervention and prevention at source, stopping people moving into the system. If we can prevent people getting into the children's and adult social care system early by investing in our communities, by investing in our voluntary sector, by investing in our family and community hubs, and having plenty of local interventions that are tailored and are specific to those communities where you are, then we can try and reduce the numbers going in. That investment up front saves significant money. We're doing bits of it at the minute, and county are doing bits of it at the minute, and districts are supporting that wherever we can, but this is proposing a significant escalation of that and more money going into the system in terms of prevention to stop that move of people into the system. And you'll see on the slide some of the things that we're saying there. There'll be neighbourhood partnerships that are put together with broadly 50,000 people in that area, but it's bringing together the agencies, the public sector agencies, agencies in that area, with ward members, with parish councils, with the voluntary sector, okay, to focus in on localities and putting in the interventions in small areas through investing at source. Okay, and there'll be neighbourhood coordination teams, new teams that are put in place to drive that coordination, to drive the commissioning of those interventions and stop our residents, our children and our adults getting into the system for as long as possible. So it's trying to prevent that. And we will talk about that more later if you want to hear a little bit more about the model. And it is the model, and we don't have all of that detail mapped out at this point, but you can see the principles and the theory behind that model. So there will be neighbourhood plans that are developed, and that will be tailored to localities. And you can see there's some pretty big numbers that are being proposed there and that are being modelled. Investing 27 million, but ultimately in 10 years' time saving 91 million out of the system, which makes our model sustainable going forward. That model, the current model, we all know isn't sustainable. The funding gaps get bigger and bigger. Something fundamentally has to change. This proposal is suggesting that change. Yes, there's an investment. Yes, there's an upfront cost, but by doing it, working in localities at source across multi-agencies, it can generate that savings. And that's what this model is proposing. Okay, can we move on again, Cameron, please? Some of this language you'll have heard before, and you'll hear probably a lot over the next couple of years as we move through. Day one, we must be safe and legal. Clearly, we're absolutely aware of that. And clearly, as officers, that's what we'll be working towards, and we will make happen. On day one, we will be safe and legal. Clearly, there's a lot of work to go on behind the scenes, and the leaders always intimate how much has gone on so far. There's going to be a hell of a lot more work that needs to happen in the next 2 years to get us to that point, but that will be the same for all proposals that are being put forward. But absolutely, you know, our residents will expect it, and we will deliver that. There will be aggregation of services, there will be disaggregation of services. You know, districts will aggregate up, some of the county services will aggregate down. That's inevitable, and there will have to be changes in every model that's being proposed. So that will be no different. And there'll be transition partnerships, there'll be transition groups, working groups set up that will manage all of that process for us. Clearly, there's going to be risks and there's going to be mitigations that we're going to have to be aware of, and there'll be specific groups and sessions that are based on working through all of those risks and the mitigations that we'll have to put in place. But again, that'll be the same for every proposal because it is all changing. We'll have to be pragmatic. You know, clearly everything won't be, you know, done from day one. There'll have to be transition processes, years and services that will be worked through. You know, any significant change like this, and it is significant, we will have to be, you know, pragmatic with, but we'll be keeping members involved and informed throughout the whole of the development of the proposal. But what we're doing is we'll be creating the foundations for that transformation that I've talked about. We have to set them out from the start. If we don't set out this fundamental principle and theory of change from day one, we're just going to get what we've always got. You know, ultimately, what it will lead to is the discretionary services that we deliver will get disinvested in as more money has to go into, you know, adult social care and children's social care as the costs get higher and higher. You know, all of the discretionary services will ultimately have to go. They'll be reduced. And is that what we want for our residents and communities? Or do we want to be brave? Do we want to make this change and, you know, and fundamentally work on this intervention, early intervention and prevention model? And that's what the focus of this model is all about. Thank you, Cameron. If you move to the next slide. Governance. I've covered most of this, so I won't go over it again. The third big bullet point there is about each unitary council must have a leader in a cabinet model. That's as required by government. So that will be the governance that will be set up in each of the unitaries. And we've talked about local service centres, and this has already been put out that in the North City South proposal that there will be a customer service centre in each of the major towns. You can imagine for Harborough that is likely to continue to be the Symington building here as the largest town in Harborough. But there will be one customer service centre in each of the major towns for our residents across the north and the south to access. Okay, next slide, please, Cameron. Towns and parish councils, I mentioned them earlier in terms of their contribution and valuable contribution to the early intervention and prevention model. Absolutely, we need to invest in them and support them, and they'll be part of the system going forward. We do have good relationships with our parish councils. We have the parish liaison meetings, and they're well attended, and we get good engagement from them. We have been meeting a number of our parish councils, and there's been growing communication and good feedback from those sessions. So we absolutely will be continuing with that. Where there isn't a parish council in any of the areas in the north or the south, then the unitaries will continue to deliver those services if that's the wish of the residents. So that's what would happen in that sense. Talked about some of these other bullet points, mentioned the ward boundaries are not yet determined. Shadow elections for unitary councils, we're saying will be May 2027. So that's when a shadow authority will start, but it's likely that the district members will continue for another year as the shadow authority sets up. And then we get to vesting day on the 1st of April 2028 for the new authority. I'm sure Liz can talk us through all of that process a bit later if you wish to hear more about that process. Okay, next slide, please, Cameron. Nearly there. Sustainable, viable councils and services. I have mentioned this already, that the model, and Andy will talk through it shortly in terms of the finance, is sustainable from the modelling. And you'll hear all about that and the 44 million savings and where they come from. No surprise where some of them come from. The number of senior leadership posts, including chief executives, obviously. Councillors I've mentioned and the reduction there in the numbers. Procurement efficiencies from the large contracts that are in existence in all of those authorities at the minute and then being aggregated and put together. Economies of scale will drive procurement efficiencies. The rationalisation of assets and property, and no, we haven't identified all of those properties at this point in time, but the model does allude to what can be achieved through rationalisation and reducing the running costs of those assets that we have across all of the areas at the moment. So that's where the bulk of the 44 million a year savings come from. But what ultimately Andy will talk through is that the current 100 million budget gap across all of the authorities at present can be turned into 100 million savings and surpluses over a 10-year period by investing upfront in interventions for that prevention agenda that we've talked about. We have talked about council tax here. We have said that there's likely to be a 5% increase for the first 3 years, as that allows the model to get going. But then after that, the savings and that 100 million surplus that we've mentioned allows that to come down. We don't think at this point in time we should be modelling it as a lower figure from day one. We're trying to be realistic and pragmatic and not make false promises, but those savings can be delivered and that can bring council tax down in time. But clearly all of these decisions are not for us. They're for the new authority and for the elected members that will be elected through the shadow authority in time. Okay, so that's where that sits. We've talked about some of the services already coming together and aggregated and disaggregated, and they're in the bullet points there. And we've talked about early intervention, and you'll see some of the figures there. For every £1 invested, £3 to £4 can be saved through that early intervention, and that's where the long-term savings do come from. But it is sustainable, and that's what Andy will share in a moment. And the last slide from me is just on the engagement. And you'll have seen all of this already in terms of the engagement. We had more than 6,500 responses during the summer to our engagement. There was strong support, as you'll be aware, for the 3 unitary model from our engagement, and 61% agreed with the proposed North City-South boundaries, which is in this model. You'll all be aware, I think, from residents that have spoken to you and from social media, there is strong opposition to change of the city's boundaries. I think you're all aware of that, and clearly we're not proposing any change. And our initial model that we went out to consultation on didn't propose any change either, and that's why those figures are what they are. We had a lot of open text comments, and that's where we got even greater clarity on not changing the boundaries. And the final point there around MPs, We've had certainly a couple that have come out to date publicly that have said they support the North City South model, and we certainly hope more so will do in time. Okay, so that was a very quick rattle through, but I am conscious of time and I am conscious of Andy's time. So, Chair, if it's all right with you, we can go straight to Andy. He can run through the finance slides and then take financial questions.
Yeah, yes, thank you, John. Andy, I'm happy for you to go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. Yeah, good to go. I will, considering you've already seen the slides or I've got a copy, I will whiz through these very quickly on the basis you'll be much more interested in asking me questions than listening to my increasingly croaky voice. So we'll whiz through these. So next slide, please, Cameron. This is what we're after today, just to give you a high level overview of how we've developed the model. Most importantly, what the model is and what it isn't. And then you can see the other three bullet points there. Next one, please. Clearly, what we've tried to do, and I think we've succeeded, is making sure that the numbers that we've modelled actually align to the narrative. And in the same way as any budget is merely a numerical presentation of the organisation's priorities and plans, so is this. This is no different, but it's very different in terms of what we're asking you to agree to. And as John has already said, it's all about, in the longer term, the prevention model and the improvement that gives to the residents in the North City South region. Next one, please. I think John has already said about the generational opportunity, and it genuinely is. And local government needs to change because, as has been said already, the pressure on children's services, adult services, SEND and homelessness is forcing probably half of local authorities up and down the country to be applying for exceptional financial support, which basically means they need to put some of the weekly shopping on the credit card. And that's a very desperate position for local government generally. So LGR, it cannot be about the finances. John's already mentioned it's 44 million of savings, bearing in mind it's a 2.4 billion budget. You're looking at 1.9%. The budget gaps forecast for the year before we go to the new model is 140 million. So the 44 that we would save from restructure doesn't even close budget gaps. So it's very clear we have to do something different once we've restructured into, as we believe, North City South. So the finances is a very small part of the case, but nevertheless, they are important. Next slide, please. It is built on assumptions. Building a 3-year MTFS, as Clive Mason would tell you, building a 3-year MTFS is difficult enough. We're trying to project out to 37, 38. So it can only be assumptions. And there are endless variations. We could have modelled 50 at least different models. We have to do one. And that one will be influenced by the committees that we're hearing this week and next, because as it's already been said, this is a draft document and we're keen that it reflects everybody's opinions wherever possible. And as has been said, we moving from where we are going to inherit budget gaps of well over 100 million through the prevention model to deliver a comfortable surplus. And of course, you wouldn't actually budget for a surplus of 100 million. You would reduce council tax, which is why, again, it's a model, not a proposal. Next slide, please. This is the important one. What the model isn't. It's not asking for decisions about the future. That's not for any of us to decide. That will be for the shadow authorities. It doesn't suggest this is the way you should do it. because there are many ways to do it. The key is to demonstrate to a government that we've got a proposal that delivers financial sustainability. We heard yesterday the outcome of the Surrey decision, and they said don't read anything into the decision about whether 2 unitaries, 3 unitaries, 4, whatever. The decision was made on the basis of that was the most financially sustainable option for Surrey. Doesn't mean it would be the same for any other region. We're not trying to get absolutely accurate because we can't predict inflation for 12 years. We can't predict demand precisely for 12 years. So we're setting out the scenario that demonstrates we can achieve sustainability. It's not a high risk approach. It's not overly ambitious. And I'll tell you how we've measured that in a couple of slides time. And we're not saying residents are going to have to face 5% annual council tax increases for the next 12 years. If inflation runs at 2%, then we shouldn't expect council tax to increase by 5%. We can only do that if we change how we deliver services and how we work with residents. And most of all, this is not a budget. It's not a long-term financial strategy. It's a model. Next slide, please, Cameron. So we've tackled this from 2 perspectives. The financial efficiencies, which is largely the bit that comes from restructuring 10 councils to 3. And then once you've got your 3 councils, what are you going to do for the next 10 years to make sure you're sustainable and not simply repeating the pressures that upper tier authorities particularly are facing, and districts with homelessness as a particular pressure. We've got to avoid repeating the patterns of what's gone before. Next slide, please. John's already touched on some of this. So this is a very quick look at the 44 million. I've already said in the context of Leicestershire, that's 1.9% of the gross budget. You would not go through all of the upheaval that LGR brings to save you 1.9%. It would be madness to do it purely for that reason. So it's got to be all the other factors that will come into play. You can see the headlines, the employees, that's deleting roughly 450 posts. But in the neighbourhood prevention model, we'd be creating somewhere around 230. So the net position isn't as stark as the 450 headline. Procurement are modest savings. We believe we will get more savings as years go on, as contracts that are long term. We can harmonise those contracts when they come up for renewal, so there'll be further procurement savings beyond the initial 9 million there. Income equalisation, we've said in the model, if you're going to equalise income, let's equalise up. So green waste collection is the prime example. One authority doesn't charge anything within Leicestershire. There are others who charge around the £60 mark. So the model says bring that to one rate, because that would make most sense within each of the North City South. And clearly, when it comes to decision day for setting budgets for 28-29, that may never come to pass, but that's a decision that's not for us to make. And I'll quickly, you can see the headlines there, and again that you may have questions on some of that, so I'll quickly move on again. We've estimated transition cost at 20 million. A significant element of that is redundancy. Government fully expect us to manage vacancies, etc., etc. And but but inevitably we will have redundancies. John said, particularly at chief executive level and the next tier down. So the cost of redundancy will be quite high on average, including pension strain where that's relevant. So we've estimated that 150 people would be made redundant and at an average cost of £80,000 for each redundancy, which is 12 million of the 20. The other 8 is for things like IT costs, project team to actually deliver the transition from the existing 10 to the new 3. Next slide, please. Excuse me, sorry. And again, you can see the other 8 million that's in our proposal, the IT. We've also got, we've built in 100 million of prudential borrowing for over the next 7 to 8 years once we go live, because the initial IT harmonisation will be making sure that we can consolidate things like the financials. We will inherit the social care systems that are vital to that safe and legal from day one. And the advice we've had from chief execs who've gone through this before is take your time on IT, but the 100 million prudential borrowing will allow us to invest in IT wherever and whenever we feel that's appropriate. But trying to guess what that might be at this stage is probably a fool's game. So we're just making sure we've got money available to deal with the costs as they occur. A project team there, and we've got a contingency of 14 million against our estimate of 20 million. So if the costs actually were 35 million, that's actually would be funded in our model. Next slide, please. So the sustainability, our approach was government would expect each of the 3 authorities to achieve a balanced budget without use of reserves as quickly as possible, bearing in mind you're starting from a position of big significant budget gaps. Of course, those budget gaps have to, by law, be closed each year. What we can't judge is whether the existing authorities will close those gaps by raising extra income, by reducing services, by making efficiencies, or simply by use of reserves. We can't judge which. I'm sure it'd be a combination of all. So to get us to a position where we're living within our means in each of the 3 councils, we've set 3 years in the model of 5% council tax increases, reducing that to 3% for the remaining 7 years. Again, that's just a model, that's not a proposal. And of course, across the 3 councils, there could well be different council tax increases each year in each of the 3 authorities. John's already mentioned the return on investment on prevention. There's studies that have been done. Adult services, the study came up with a saving of £3.17 to the public purse for every pound invested. What we can't do is do it on our own. So the prevention model does rely us with public sector partners, with voluntary sector, to work together to make sure we invest our pound as targeted as possible. So it's no good blanket coverage in things. We've got to do this based on rich data. We've got to know the people we're investing in that's going to help them live, either stay with families in the children's case, or stay at home as an adult in a safe environment and retaining their independence. I've mentioned the 100 million. The housing revenue accounts, I didn't have a lot of expertise in HRAs. I last did that over 25 years ago. So we brought in some expertise to say if there was no more funding raised, what could we do by merging the HRAs? And his response was you could get another 1,150 homes for social rent across Leicestershire without actually needing to borrow more than was already planned in the HRAs. Next slide, please. So this is the summary. The savings are good. We believe they're sensible, but as I keep saying, it's a small percentage of the overall budget. It's not going to make sustainability on its own. It needs much more than that, and we believe the model is just that. I'm not sure if there are any more slides, but if I could just add, one of the things we didn't quite get to before we published for the 20th of October was the sensitivity analysis and the risk and opportunities that we're doing. That will be available and will be included in the final submission. Essentially, we've looked at all the risks and we believe we've got over 300 million pound of risks by the time we get to year 10 if everything went against us. We also think we've got about 300 and odd million of opportunities to cover those risks. So, for example, we built in inflation at the Bank of England targets 2% after 2027. If inflation runs at 3%, that's going to add another 300 million a year by the time we get to 37, 38. But we've got headroom within the council tax assumptions if that was needed. So again, a whole series of assumptions, but it's also key that we've done some sensitivity analysis that looks at what the risks and opportunities are across the period. The biggest thing with inflation, of all the risks and opportunities we've got, inflation is the one thing that the existing councils or the new councils have little influence or control over. Everything else is kind of things that we can influence as local authorities. Inflation, much less so. So for me, inflation is the biggest risk you face over the next 12 years or so. Yes, and that is an absolute whistle-stop tour. So back to either the chair or.
Yes, thank you, Andy, and also thank you, Councillor Knowles and John, for your presentation as well. So I know that many of you will have questions on this very important item. So what I'm going to suggest is roughly we leave an hour and a half to deal with these questions, and then at least half an hour to make a summary of sort of recommendations, but that doesn't need to be set in stone. It's just a format. Now, as a reminder, we're being asked to identify any areas that we'd like to receive further information ahead of the council debate on the 10th of November, and make any recommendations we consider appropriate for council and cabinet to consider. And then what I will be doing is giving a short presentation at council on what we've agreed. I assume there's going to be lots of questions. I'd ask you to try and keep them brief and not repetitive of other questions that have been asked, because we will all have a chance at full council to express an opinion on this. Tonight is not about supporting or opposing this. It's about coming up with questions, recommendations, and asking the appropriate questions, which will be, as I say, formatted at the end. Now, given our time with Andy is more limited, I'd also suggest if your question is finance related, to try and prioritise that over the non-finance related questions. And with that, I'm happy to open up the panel to questions. Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yes, you're right. Thank you. There's obviously a lot of work gone into this. However, Andy, thanks for your financial presentation. It is disappointing, however, I do want to make the point, Chairman, that this does appear to be a very rushed presentation. And given that this chap has got to go off to another meeting, that is concerning because obviously there's a lot of financial information in the report. So unable to interrogate and not literally interrogate, you understand that, but to do a proper job on it, I am concerned about the short nature of this. But the specific question I did have, a couple of questions. So first of all, this neighbourhood prevention model that's been mentioned. First of all, where's the evidence that this pound equals £3.17 saving? If we go into this prevention model. Second point, which is related to that, is preventing people, unfortunately requiring children's services or adult social care, which is currently 73% of the gross expenditure of the county council. And most upper tier authorities is around 70% or if not higher. So if that's the starting gambit, how do we know? Prevention models take a long time to actually stop someone falling in to need. You can't just switch it on and off like a tap. So I'm a bit concerned that some of what's being talked about is, well, we're going to make some savings straight away. Really? Do you really think that's possible? I'm really concerned about that because prevention by its very nature takes a long time to actually divert people or persuade them to pursue another course of action. So that's one concern I have. And this thing about inflation, I do think that maybe some of the information that's buried in Appendix 2 might have been more helpful to actually have in the main body of the report. But in particular, what would be extremely helpful, I know, Andy, you mentioned the 2.4 billion gross expenditure of all the councils. That would be quite handy if there was a table showing all that and what the breakdown currently is for each council. And also what you've mentioned the budget deficit you actually said 140, and I think in the report it says 109 or something. Well, actually, nobody really knows what the figure is at the moment because that's based on what the MTFS and the financial reporting of all the councils is. But I do think that it would be helpful if there was a section which was a bit more forward in the report to actually show this is what the deficits are or anticipated deficits are at the constituent authorities across LLR, because at the moment that's not very easy to actually find out from anywhere. And finally, the other question I had was coming back to the disaggregation of services. That's and I'm looking at, in particular, it says, well, in the report, I'm just paraphrasing, it talks about, well, we'd seek to try and distribute and rebalance operational delivery across if there was 3 social care authority areas. That's an incredibly complex and difficult thing to do. Have we actually got anyone, because we're going to have to go out there and recruit 2 new directors of adult social care, 2 new directors of children's services, because there's no guarantee that the existing director or directors would actually wish to or want to stay in post. And if we, along with a lot of other councils, are going to have to go out there exactly at the same time, recruiting these very specialist and very senior staff who we're going to need from day one to be safe, because otherwise, if we don't have a director of children's services, don't have a director of adult social care, we would not be legally compliant as an authority, whatever the new authority is. So that's to me, that's a really, really important thing. And I'm not really getting a level of confidence here about this. I'm just wondering, what's the risk we're running here if we don't get these people by day one, assuming that this gets the green light from government, because at the end of the day, it is all predicated on that. So there were my starter questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King. Just to remind, I've been asked to remind people that if there are any questions that cannot be answered today, that the officers have told me that they are committed to getting responses ahead of the next council meeting. Before I bring anybody else in, just Andy, did you want to answer any of those, or could you answer any of those questions from Councillor King, please?
Yeah, I'll try and answer all of those. I'm probably in reverse order. So the disaggregation is a very real issue. I think the operational risk is far bigger than the financial risk. So we've currently got 3 upper tier authorities, and we will have 3 upper tier authorities moving forward. So there's an infrastructure in place, but you're absolutely right, Councillor King. Whether we've got the people who want and can do the jobs in the new structures is a different question. So we are still looking at the disaggregation costs in terms of the actual task of disaggregating social care budgets. It's a lot easier now, I believe, than it was when I last disaggregated a budget down in Kent when Medway went away from the county, because the data and the systems are much better now. But it's a lot of work. B, making sure you're attracting the right staff, bearing in mind that there are 20 other regions going through the same process at the same time. Disaggregation as an operational risk, I think, is very, very significant. So we'll need managing. The inflation point is, again, it's very relevant that it's not necessarily focused. One of the things we had is in such a big report with so many key bits of information, how do you best present that, either in the body of the report or it gets hidden in the appendix, and it's not hidden on purpose, it's just we can't get everything on the front page type issue. Evidence of prevention working, there's a joint report by ADAS, Newton Europe and the LGA, I believe, that is based on a number of pilot projects that were delivered across, I think, about 20 authorities. And it's been generally recognised that for £1 you invest, you get £3.17 back. Now, that is a weighted return on a whole range of interventions. And some of those do come through quite quickly. They clearly don't come through in a week or a month, but they do start to pay back relatively quickly. What you can't do for older people is change the life choices they've made thus far. So we can't suddenly make people much more active than they've been hitherto, or a lot healthier, because we are where we are. But you can bring in interventions that will stop that. Those individuals, for example, needing a care package of home support for 20 hours a week, but with the right preventions, it can be 10 hours a week, and therefore you save, somewhere around £200 a week. So there is evidence, and you're absolutely right, Councillor King. The adults and children's takes 3/4 of the budget, and that's why the target has to be that doesn't become 90%. And the only way we can do that is the prevention model, because unless we do, 73% becomes 80%, becomes 90%, and as I think it was the leader who said, we'll end up with no discretionary services. Again, rushed answers after a rushed presentation, but hopefully that touched some of what you was after. I've made a note. Can we make some of this information more prominent in the as a table, etc.? So we will look at how we can hopefully do that.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to that recruitment of a DCS and a DAS. Obviously, in a continuing situation, or we've got 3 DCS, we've got 3 DAS. They may not be have the same level of residents to deal with, but we do have those people in place. Equally, we've got 3 social care authorities that will be continuing up to vesting day, and they will have the statutory requirements for those officers to be in place anyway. So if any of those officers were looking to leave or did leave, those organisations would still need to recruit to those positions. And it would be at that point then that the shadow authority could then start to look at how that could intervene to recruit those early, to ensure that we've got those chief officers in early, and to mitigate those risks going forward. So the sooner we recruit as a shadow authority, and the less competition we have with the other 20 areas that are looking for that, the better really. And that will be down for the shadow authority at its first meeting to agree how it's going to recruit to its statutory officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So I've got Councillor Taylor, Councillor Scott, and Councillor Grafton Reid. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Thanks for all the work that's gone into this. I appreciate there's been a huge amount to try and get your heads around and assimilate. I suppose I just have a question in terms of the financial modelling, and if it had taken into account the impact of climate change and what we know is will be coming in terms of increased risk of flooding, subsidence, wind damage, all things like that. Really, has that been a consideration in the modelling, please? And if it hasn't, can it be?
Andy, feel free to come in.
Yeah, in terms of the financials, no. What we've been very clear to, I say very clear, perhaps we haven't been clear enough, is to say that the services that we currently provide at the cost we provide will continue across the piece as impacted by demand and inflation. We absolutely haven't tried to estimate the impact of climate change. The amount that the authorities currently spend on climate change and environmental issues would carry on as is, but we've not tried to model the impact of say increased severe weather events. We simply haven't got to that level of detail. Your next question was, can it be? Yeah, I mean, it's a mighty fine challenge. I don't know if we could make a good estimate of that. It's a bit. Do you forecast for? So take highways. You will have a set number of sorting runs built into the budget model. We have not said, well, as winters get more mild, we won't need as many sorting runs. Equally, we've not factored in that we may need to do more flood work to avoid flooding, etc., etc. So it's a good challenge, and we'd have to probably bring in some expertise around that. So
thank you, Andy.
I'll
I'll
give you a more positive answer. Sorry.
No problem. I'll bring in Liz Elliott.
So thank you, Chair. Just so members know, I was on the steering group as part of the creation of this proposal, which is an overarching group that looks at all of the different aspects of it. What I think we can't do is this is a prospectus for the future, and we can't go into the granular detail of what exactly it is we would do on our climate action change. But what we could probably do, and Andy, this is something for consideration, I think one of our recommendations that might come forward is that we should at least reference that the climate impact will be something we need to consider, but isn't in the financial modelling at the moment. But that equally will be down to where we look at things like flood responses and those type of things. Could be a more strategic sub-regional level, but that again will be down to the strategic authority perhaps to take on, or indeed the shadow authority to decide what its climate agenda is. And depending on the elected members, they may have an appetite for more or less. So at the moment, I think the best we can do is just make sure that we reference it in the proposal, that it is a consideration we need to do. But I don't think there's we couldn't do any financial modelling or build it into costings, but we would need to just reference that it is a consideration for the future as part of the proposal and the development of those strategies that come forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Scott.
I'd like to thank everyone so far for their input. It's been very helpful. I've been taking input not only from the documents that I have here, but listening to a lot of input from Leicestershire County Council, from other councils, from all sorts of different opinions. Given that social care is one of the most expensive pressures on upper tier councils, don't you think we should evaluate all the proposals and put a lot of weighting, a lot of heavy weight on the decisions on the risk-based services, the delivery of those services to people, to actual people? This moves away from financial considerations. I know you said you'd like to deal with those first, but leading on to disaggregation, I mean, the effects of the quality of care on users, there could be significant upheaval for people who are affected by that. And when services are split into smaller units, and they will inevitably be smaller units, the north, central and south. I think analysis says that the larger unitaries are able to deliver better ratings from Ofsted because they have development, they have quality assurance, they have better quality assurance, and they attract experienced leadership as well. And conversely, that obviously smaller authorities may not be able to do that. So I would personally like more flesh on the bones with regard to provision of adult services, the provision of child services, and I think less leaning onto the early intervention and prevention that we seem to have concentrated on that. I think personally too heavily. That's my input. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so again, thank you for that, Councillor Scott. So I've gone through disaggregation of adult social care. Children's services is not the same because I did a children's trust in Northamptonshire and then disaggregate the education and the other parts of children's social care. And you will all be aware that Surrey's County Council's decision was made yesterday, which does look at disaggregation. Admittedly bigger populations than that, but it is still disaggregation of social care and for children and adults. It is difficult, it is not easy, which is why safe and legal is our paramount and the protection of vulnerable people. And you'll see in our proposal, it says it is a non-negotiable that everybody is protected and safeguarded on day one. We would look to do that through that disaggregation. I think we could look at putting more flesh on the bones, as you say, about what it is in disaggregation. We've put in some very high level steps about making sure everybody's safe on day one, that we would look to continue with practice methodology, that we'd look at the infrastructure and the IT systems so that nobody goes down cracks or anything like that. It will be something that is a massive undertaking for the implementation executive and the implementation board as we go into shadow authority, and I'll think about how we can put some more flesh on the bones. The fundamental principle of our proposal is prevention, and to stopping people getting into that situation where they need that intervention or that more clinical need. We want to do a more well-being model. So let me think about how I can flesh out those elements for you. I'll take it back through steering group and we'll try to put something else on. If you've got specific ideas of what you think needs to be in there, email me and let me know, and I can then try and put some context around what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Sorry, Josie, just briefly to come back on that, really, yes, it's briefly, but thank you very much. That's been very helpful. The flesh on the bones just really is, I was listening, as I've listened to a lot of input on this, and was the fact that it's just the delivery is and the risks are so high, and it is a fundamental well, it is a very high cost. 75%, I think was the figure was mentioned. So it's and I think our approach, or seems to be the approach that Hartford District Council, we haven't the expertise in social care, have we? We don't know. So where has all this, where has some of this information come from? Have we gone out to independent sources? Have we approached Leicestershire County Council on this and asked them for their input from their heads of service?
I'll just come back to that. We have had professional input through Rutland, through their DCS and their DAS, and whether they are smaller in comparison to other people, they are still professionals in that area. They have still got those statutory responsibilities, and they still have the knowledge and understanding of how to deliver a service. I take on board what you're saying about should we go out and look for further professional input on that. What we have done as well is referred back to the District Council's network, and they've done 2 reports on disaggregation and how to manage that through. And we've looked through that and taken on board best practice that they've done. But, you know, we've got some time yet. And the way that it would be implemented, again, would be down to the implementation executive and that strategic, the shadow authority coming into being. And it is difficult. I'm not suggesting it is difficult or easy, but it can be done and it can be done safely. And if we can do it in a way that gives us that foundation for prevention and for improving people's health and well-being in the future, it is well worth the investment of doing that, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Knowles, understand that you want to come in on this one as well.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Chair. I think, first of all, Rutland was obviously what I was going to say to you. It's important. They've had a tremendous amount of input and ability to help us with that. But I think this is clearly a good example of what tonight's all about, because you're feeding in the sort of information that is vitally important so that we can take it on board, go back and look at providing more detail. So I do thank you for that, because I think that is it's a vitally important piece that you're raising there. And our officers will be looking at that. We will work it up, and we will come, get it, look to get it included, because I think it is, it's important. This isn't a finished document. It's very, very much a draft. It's a work in progress. So, thank you for your comments on that, because it's such important input, and the more the merrier.
I'm going to go to Councillor Grafton-Reid and then Councillor Bannister.
Thank you, Chair. Echo the comments from others about the complexity of this and the good work done so far. So, I notice here the statement about the town and parish councils being a vital part of the democratic arrangements, but also in the delivery of this prevention model. So, have you done any modelling about the staff that they're going to have to recruit in order to deliver this, and where does that fit into the cost that they will have to bear, which will then be counterbalanced by the savings you've got here? Because it's my experience in that area is they do not have any skills in this area of any great depth, and you're going to be putting a significant load on them. So I wish to understand that. Secondly, this return on investment, we keep coming back to this, but I do want to see some more flesh on the bones on that, and what proportion of the 44 million is actually created by this calculation. So I'd like to see that analysis drawn out so we can see the sensitivity of that as well, please. Okay, and I'll have some other questions later. Thank you.
Could I just answer the second one, Chair?
Yes, please do.
So the prevention is totally separate to the 44 million. The 44 million is the savings effectively from restructuring the existing 10 councils to 3. The savings on prevention is the sustainability. So it's two quite separate things. But clearly the fact that the questions come means we got to be clearer in the narrative about that difference. So as the leader has said, all comments are very gratefully received. Chair, I'm really sorry I'm late for another committee. If I say I've got 5 minutes, would that be acceptable?
Yes, and hopefully Clive can try to take anything. But yes, thank you for the pre-warning. Councillor Grafton-Reid, did that answer your question sufficiently?
Only the second part, not the first part about the load. Let's let that come out in the detailed documentation, which inevitably you're going to produce and provide to us.
Should we come to that after Andy's one? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Bannister and then we'll come back to that.
Thank you, Chair. Do we still have Andy with us?
Yeah.
For 5 minutes. I'll try and cut to the chase then. It is in relation to the cost savings. And I understand, certainly from the aggregation of the district and borough councils in the south and in the north, where you're going to find a number of those savings. My issue is more with the city, which I understand to be, if one believes the commentary in the local media and the statements by the city mayor, that the city is in a precarious financial position. The city has already aggregated its services. It is a unitary authority already. So where do the savings come for the city that would make the North City South option attractive to them? And how would it repair their own budget gaps and their so-called precarious financial position?
Thank you. If you'd like to come in, Andy.
Yes, certainly. So on the 44 million savings, of which 19 are staffing, none of those savings apply to the city. So that's just north and south. So of the 44 million, virtually nothing hits the city bottom line. We have a view as to whether their finances are as precarious as they say. But nevertheless, it's not for us to judge that. But just to be really clear, there is no immediate saving, no share. We are not saying to the city, you need to reduce your staffing budgets by X. What we have said is to be sustainable, you would need to develop the prevention model. And again, that is just a model. That's not saying to the city, you should do that. We're saying if you did that, you'd be sustainable, but you may choose to do something else. You may choose another option. You may manage your demand in other ways. But what is clear, we got to manage demand moving forward. So just to be clear, none of the savings that were part of that 44 million actually apply to the city.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy, for taking our questions. I understand, obviously, you've got somewhere else to be, so you're excused. I'll go to John Richardson so he can finish answering Councillor Grafton Reid's questions before we move on.
Okay, thanks, Chair. In relation to parishes, I think we'll all know that we have very different kinds of parishes within the district. Some are large, some are small, some have offices, some don't have offices. So I don't think we can make a sweeping statement that all parishes will be in a position that they can support the prevention model going forward. What the model does suggest is that where we do have parishes that are willing, that have the resources, and it's likely to be the larger parishes, they will play an absolute fundamental role in the local intelligence that feeds into those partnerships. And there may also be vehicles for delivery through grant funding, using their facilities, putting on activities in their locality. So I think the model will evolve with the parishes that are set up and able and willing to do so. And they'll become increasingly important parts of the prevention model going forward. I'm just going to hand over to Liz, because I think Liz can talk about our community wellbeing plan and how that will also feed into communities and parish work.
Yeah, so we at Harbour District, as you know, we've got the community wellbeing plan that's been through Cabinet that we're developing out and looking to create future fit communities that can be sustainable for themselves, that can help and support with that prevention model. We've looked to invest in community grants, as you'll know, into parishes as well, into community groups. We're looking to do community development with them. We're looking to work with others, particularly around open spaces. We've got some very big and exciting projects around open spaces. So we are already starting to put in place the very first foundations for that sort of public health wellbeing model, whereby we know that things like housing are really important to people's health and wellbeing and their life outcomes. We know that skills and employment are really important, so we're putting something in place for that, and particularly around young people being able to stay in our district around affordable housing and those skills and employment. Open spaces and being able to enjoy your environment and feel a green and open space is part of where you live is really important. So we're already starting to do quite a lot of that in what we're proposing to do over the next year or two. And the public health methodology is a common practice now in public sector delivery for that health and wellbeing model. And we are just building the foundations for future, and the proposal, this sort of prospectus that we've got here of what we could do and the potential and the vision that we could take from that prevention model. We're actually already putting that in place for our residents and our parishes and our communities, so that they are ready for what comes post vesting day. And if they want to be involved with this, we've got 2 years to train them up and get them involved and get them excited about it. Or they might say, no, thank you very much, we'll just sit and do what we want to do. So we've got that 2-year opportunity to really develop them and to ask them what they want and to engage with them, so they're ready to take on things should they want to, or if they choose not to, they can just be part of what, however they see fit. But we do want to invest in them over the next couple of years to make them ready to be ready should they want to be. Thank you.
Councillor Finan.
Yeah, apologies if I've missed it somewhere, but on the numbers in each of the North, City and South, is there an expectation of how that will grow over the next 10 years? I've not seen a figure for it, and obviously we would have an idea of the housing supply, so I may have missed it, but I think in terms of the information being presented,
so I might just need to make sure that Kay agrees with me on this, but I think what we've done is we've estimated what the population would be at vesting day and used that particular model around what it would be in a couple of years' time based on the latest ONS figures that came out and that projected growth. So we've used the stats that we've got available, and we've used that modelling going forward around what we think it will be in the future for that vesting day. I don't know, Kay, whether you've got any further information on the population stats and whether we modelled past vesting day, but I know definitely we've used the latest statistics and to vesting day.
Yeah, no, that's right. We just used the projected figures for 2028 across all of the models.
so it's for 2028. So we would probably expect to see quite a bit of population change in that time, wouldn't we, between the areas? And I don't know. That's obviously going to play. We're speculating 10 years forecast in terms of finances, but we're not forecasting the population as well when 75%, as we've just discussed.
I don't know what's in the financial modelling as to whether they've forecasted population growth and demand growth for those 10 years based on population growth. I would imagine they have, but that's definitely something we can take away and clarify. And if they haven't, to make sure that they consider whether that should be part of their modelling. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Knowles.
Yeah, just to answer that, if I may, it's certainly something that's been discussed amongst the leaders about the numbers going forward, because you are right, we're looking forward quite a considerable number of years. Obviously, again, it's an important point that you've raised. It's something we need to look at inclusion in the document. So I've just said to the chief exec, we need to look at that and to look at getting something included so people have got the picture moving forward. So thank you for raising that.
Councillor King, and then I'll go Councillor Wellband.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. It's very disappointing that, as I said earlier, that Mr. Wood has had to leave the meeting, because I do feel there are quite a lot of questions, I think, that do come back to this modelling, financial modelling. I think what would be quite helpful is if there was a very clear list somewhere in the final document of what the financial assumptions, a list of all the assumptions that have been made. Again, if you've got to trawl through 250 pages of appendices to find the assumptions, it's kind of, and there's a lot of text, but it was just a simple list. These are the assumptions we've made. That's actually a lot easier to find. It's just a presentational thing. But if I come back to what I was talking about earlier, what I'm concerned about, and I do have some knowledge on this, is, and I know some officers do as well. So let's just take the Rutland example. Rutland is a very small county unitary, has a population of 44,000 people. And yes, it does have a director of education and it does have a director of adult social care. But those services are provided currently, because there's a delegation, to Leicestershire County Council. So they actually do not provide their own services. They're currently provided by the upper tier authority in Leicestershire. What we haven't talked about here, what this hasn't talked about, is there are currently a number of specialist teams that operate across Leicestershire, across adult social care and children's services. Very niche teams, very few people, but they're very, very important, going back to this prevention agenda. So if these niche teams get disbanded and have to disaggregate, how are we going to ensure talking about, child abuse or, things like that. How are we going to ensure that those teams, those very specialist teams, very important teams, are actually going to be available to us in, say, there's a North City South? And if and the other thing I wanted to just talk about as well and ask a question about is in the summary financial efficiency of LGR on page 53 of the draft report, it indicates that the savings to the south, which we're in, because that's the bit I'm interested in, the south, if this happens, is 21 million of the 44 hypothetical amount. But actually, overall, out the 44.2 million, 15 million is predicated on harmonisation of fees and charges and also asset rationalisation. Now, they're big stabs in the dark, because what that's assuming is that the modelling is assuming that whatever the new authority is will make those decisions, but it may not do. It may not make increases in council tax according to what's been predicated in this modelling. This is all speculative forecasting, because political decision making will make those decisions. So we are not making those decisions now. We're just guessing what those decisions will be, because the new council, because it won't be Harbour District, it will be, if it's south, it will be whatever the name is for that council. And the councillors on that council, whoever they are, will make that decision. It won't be us making that decision unless we're on that new council, which we may or may not do, depending on all sorts of things. So this is the bit that's concerning me, that a large chunk of what's in this savings is predicated on future decisions that people who are not yet in a position to make those decisions may or may not choose to actually make. And that's a pretty important thing, I think, because we can't make those decisions in advance and say, oh, we're going to harmonise, and because no successor body will, you can't put that on them. So I think there are some real challenges with this financial. And then coming back to the saving, Andy was talking about, well, it's 1.9% across 2.4 billion. Well, okay, but what's 21 million over whatever our bit is for South? And what's the bit for the North? That's the figures I'm interested in. Yes, the global amount's interesting, but and it's not a great big figure. It's not a lot of money. And if nearly half of what we're talking about saving is coming from fees and charge harmonisation and asset rationalisation, which may or may not ever come to pass, then I'm a bit concerned that these things may not actually happen. And there's all sorts of other things. So I'm just hypothetically, just wondering how you can actually model something based on something that may not actually be ever decided. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that's quite an interesting point, Councillor King. Thinking about residents, and they're not politically minded, they don't, not thinking about local government, and you say to the public, there's going to be savings, and then the council tax goes up. They'll say, hang on a minute, what happened to the savings? So a lot of things are based on hypotheticals, as you say, and quite right to point out in my view. But John or Councillor Knowles, happy for either of you to take this one up.
Well, on the additional financial information you need, I'm absolutely supportive of getting some work done on that to let you have as much as we can. Clive might be able to throw some light on it, but I will just say one thing. I think it's well worth pointing out that, yes, there's an awful lot of assumptions that have got to go into the production of this document and the way forward and where we might ultimately end up. But that's exactly the same at the county and exactly the same at the city, because all we can do is to take the information from our experts and to take their input and make our best guess. Because, as I said right at the start of this tonight, ultimately we can lay the foundations for what we believe is the best way forward for our communities. But the decisions will lie, as you absolutely rightly say, with the members who will be elected to those new authorities. So we can only do our best with it. I believe we've done the right thing here. We've taken the advice of the experts. We've come up with what we believe is the best option for the communities and the most workable option. And then obviously we've come and said, well, this is what we're saying, this is what's been put forward. Please let us have your views. If you have any views or comments, and I'm delighted to say members are doing that tonight, putting their information forward. But respectfully, I would say that the position that we're in is exactly the same as the city, exactly the same as the county. The big difference is at the county, you've had a slideshow. The city have done nothing. And we've put a document on the table running into tens of pages, all supported with evidence from experts. So at least we've got something we can discuss. And at the moment, I think in the city and the county, they don't have anything that in reality they can discuss with any real meaning. So I think we're going to have some interesting discussions about what they finally put on the table as well. This is the best guess, and as I say, North City South for me is the best option.
Chair, did you want me to cover the?
Yes, absolutely.
So just the point that Councillor King raised around niche services with adults and children's social care, and I did mention a word during my earlier presentation around pragmatism, and clearly if there are niche services that there are a small number of people in highly specialised roles that are currently delivering across the whole of the county footprint, then why would we not look to continue in that vein? Clearly we are not going to put children or adults at risk by disaggregating those niche services that are far better and better value for money ran over the full footprint. So, we have listed in the document some services that will continue to be delivered at that scale where it's appropriate to do so, and we absolutely will.
Yes, you can, Councillor.
So then what you're talking about is having complex governance arrangements in place to manage oversight those services, because you would have to do that if they're run on a LLR basis, whatever LLR looks like. I'm just using that as an explorative, a figurative, rather than the actual whatever it is. You'd have to have some sort of joint arrangements for governance, and that then creates another tier of bureaucracy. But if I can just come back to a fundamental point, in the Minister McMahon's letter in March this year, he said one of the key criteria that the different layers of local government across LLR had to look at was the financial viability of the city, I believe 27, 28 onwards. And I'm not terribly clear what work has been done by the districts and Rutland to look at the financial sustainability of the city, and where is that specific information? Because just going forward, this is going to go to the government with whatever changes are made to it. And the government's going to look at that and they're going to say, okay, so what have you done here to look at whether the city is actually financially viable, if it stays as it is, or if it does something else? Now, obviously, we all know the city's got an expansion plan. How large an expansion plan that is, who knows? There's all sorts of interesting stories around about that at the moment. Hardly be a city if it was what I've heard today, but I'm just wondering, what is the proposal here in terms of, you've said the city is financially sustainable, but what have you based those assumptions on? What modelling is being done with the city to determine that that is actually the case? Because they have a huge deficit at the moment, and I'm just wondering how you actually know that's going to be the case. Because if it's not, then clearly the government's going to say, well, that doesn't deliver financial sustainability for the city, so therefore, and nil points, as they could say, just to be oversimplistic. The same applies to the county council, of course.
I'll bring in Liz Elliott.
Thank you. So I'm going to answer you a bit about services, and Clive will answer you a bit about the city viability, because there is a section in the appendix that refers to it. So on that, the way that we would look at those services, typically when you go into a local government reorganisation and you go to vesting day, not everything is perfect on day one, and not everything is disaggregated, and not everything is where it should be. And there is a different range, and the blueprints will be worked up through the implementation executive and those shadow authorities about what on day one services look like. There will be a number of arrangements whereby there are still services that are hosted, and that will be delivered by one authority for the other authorities. There will be arrangements whereby you will want to continue to have joint arrangements. There'll be a joint committee that's created as part of the structural changes order that will be looking at the implementation plan. That joint committee could potentially continue into the new arrangements post vesting day, but with different members around the table, because there will be different authorities in that. We already have joint committees around Revs and Bens that work quite well. We've also, you mentioned in there that Rutland services for some of its adults and children is delivered by the county. It could be no different between a North City South, in that one authority could deliver, as the county is currently doing for Rutland, through a hosted or a, not necessarily a shared arrangement, but through something like a section 113 arrangement, whereby we put staff at the disposal of other authorities. There are a multitude of different ways that we can make sure that as we go into that vesting day, everything is safe and legal. And equally, then we've got an opportunity to say, should this continue? Do we need to change this? Do we need to give the new authorities time to recruit and become stable before we unravel some of those arrangements? So there is a plan, or there will be, as part of that implementation plan, as to how we do that safely, how we then look at whether we continue with that blueprint model post vesting day and continue. Even some of the authorities that have gone 3-4 years ago still have those shared arrangements and joint committees in place. It is part of reorganisation and the way that governance will work. Whether they continue in perpetuity or they are things that will be after transition period and into the transformation period, that will be down for those new authorities and the governance arrangements that they decide going forward. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. In respect of the city, you'll remember what Andy said about savings to Councillor Bannister's question. Also, in the Appendix 2, paragraph 4.2, there's a whole section on financial health indicators. So they've looked at the 8 key indicators for local government financial health, and the city mirrors exactly the north and south criteria as well. So it has been gone into, and the experts have determined that the city is as viable as north and south, and most of it is green.
Councillor Wellband.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for all the work on this. My question, or my point, is about modelling, which Councillor does cover, to be honest, and it is based on a series of assumptions. And I'm still not clear in my mind how this one model, as it says here, this model is just one variant of very many alternatives. I'm still not entirely clear how this model was finalised, and it would be helpful if we could have some sort of summary of this model and all the things that have been put into it, so we can be clear. The second point, which has been covered, was about the city, and I know, Clive, you just mentioned that has been covered by experts, but I'm still not confident, I guess, that that's going to be right, because essentially this is proposing a city exactly as it is, and they are saying they're not viable in their current form. And as you said, Councillor Knowles, they've just not engaged in this process at all. They've gone ahead and done their own thing, and seemingly, if you believe the headlines today, they want to take Harbour in their entirety, which is extremely worrying to us all. And my third point is about, and we've not really covered this yet, about governance. And there's just a point in the presentation which says about ward boundaries for councillors are yet to be determined. And I just wondered what that means. Does that mean that potentially we're going to stay with existing county boundaries, district boundaries, or are we talking about a reorganisation of boundaries? In which case, if we're talking about that latter point, then that is a lot of work for the Local Government Boundary Commission for England, who are going to have to deal with a lot of these new authorities. So a little bit more info on that would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll let Clive talk about the financial bits, but on that governance arrangement and those number of councillors. So the way that we've looked at that is to look at the average sort of how many electorate per typical unitary councillor, and we've come up with those figures. What happens in the immediate structural changes order is that you say, probably using county divisions rather than ward boundaries or something like that, you would put in the structural changes order what those ward boundaries would be and how many councillors per ward boundary they would do. It's usually based on, like I say, county divisions. What happens then is before the second election to that unitary council, as you quite rightly said, the boundary commission comes in, looks at it, rechanges all those boundaries and then allocates ward members accordingly to that. So it is an estimate to start with. What we would do is then work with MHCLG as to what we wanted to see go into that structural changes order, and those boundaries haven't been decided as to whether they're ward, district ward boundaries or county divisions yet, how we would do that. We've estimated the number of councillors we think would be needed based on electorate, and then the boundary commission would come in post first free shadow election and before the second election and do that commission review, and then those firm boundaries would be put in place with those electorates in. And obviously, as you will know, when they look at that, they look at the growth of the population as well and to see where it's going in the future. They don't just do it on as is, they do it as future projections of where those growth might be. So if we've got some big developments that are coming forward, they would take that into consideration as part of that. So that's what would happen. Okay.
Through Chair, in respect of future funding, well, we all know that the fair funding review's on the horizon. It will be implemented next year, but the modelling that I've seen on that is showing that the upper tier is doing quite well out of the potential allocations, and it is the districts that are not doing as well out of those allocations. So it looks on paper favourable and better for unitary authorities. So that's a good place to be if we are moving to a unitary model. Of course, they will disaggregate that as they would disaggregate everything else. But it's looking better for unitary authorities than it is for districts. Okay, thank you.
Before we move on to the next phase of this meeting, which is to formulate the recommendations, is there any more questions or queries? Councillor King?
Sorry, through you, Chair. So I had got a couple of questions, just about more kind of fundamental issues. So in this prevention model, communities model that you've come up with, you've based the foundation, the foundation block seems to be primary care networks. Now, primary care networks, on my understanding, are basically the practice area of GP surgeries. I'm just a bit curious as to why why across the districts in Rutland you've decided to alight on primary care networks, which were decided by private contractors to the NHS. In agreement with the NHS, that we had no involvement because they ignored everything we said when we said they weren't particularly representative of local areas. So I'm just a bit concerned we've gone down that route, down that rabbit hole of using primary care networks to kind of base our neighbourhood proposal, or your proposal, because it's not mine. And I'm just wondering why we've done that. Second thing is, and this is a bit more fundamental. So what I'm kind of not really clear about, it is talked about in the report, but it's kind of skated over. Perhaps that's because decisions were made by the leaders of the seven districts and Rutland earlier on. But why have you come up with this three? Well, the two plus the city, because they're not really changing the city, because they are, whatever you say about it, the population numbers are significantly less, around 20% less of the government's guidance figure of 500,000. Now, you mentioned Surrey County Council's, the government's decision around Surrey yesterday. Well, the Surrey population for West Surrey is 663,000 and East Surrey is 551. So very clearly, we're talking about population sizes which are significantly lower. And okay, the government will say, don't pay any attention to what we've already decided. But governments always say that and then promptly decide to do exactly what they've done there, and they do it everywhere else. So I am a bit concerned about the population sizes of these authorities, and I get it on one level, but on another level, why north south? Why not east west? Because that also had certainly I would have thought that had some merit, and certainly the bit with Rutland going into the north, to me that doesn't make any sense because Rutland's got much more from a population culture, has got a lot more connectivity with Harborough. But I suppose if you're sticking Melton in the north, then that's what you do. But this is some of the fundamental why you've gone with that. But I mean, it's too late in the day to change all that. But I'm just curious as to why we've gone with this. And I'm not going to get a real answer on that because that's a political decision. I get that, but why are we going with the primary care networks as the fundamental building block? Or it seems that from the information I've read in the report, unless I've misread it, and I stand to be corrected. Thank you.
So, Councillor King, I'll take the geography of those neighbourhoods question. What we did was we took a modelling tool that overlaid all of the different coterminous boundaries for different things like wards, for policing neighbourhoods, for primary care networks, and all of the different units of different governance and parish councils, etc. And we overlaid those, and we looked for where we thought that the most best fit for all of those different overlaying of coterminous geographies would be easy to understand. We're saying primary care network, but actually that is still to be decided. Those geographies don't have to be the primary care network. They were just a unit of geography that seemed to represent quite closely some of those other coterminous boundaries. So we thought that actually we wanted about 9 or 10 across the area. You don't want too many, otherwise it becomes too burdensome to do from a governance point of view and to coordinate, but we didn't want them to be very small and down at too lower level, because we can then use those primary care network footprints or those 50,000 footprints to have that overarching neighbourhood view, and then we can go down into communities and different levels of geographies at lower levels through those other partners that we've got in place, through the community groups, through those parish councils. So it was a first stab at a credible geography that gave us roughly the right things. It isn't set in stone, and it will be revised on future, and we will need to look at other factors when we look at whether we set up those neighbourhoods or not. But we did overlay those geographies and see where those coterminous boundaries almost met each other, and the primary care network was a really good unit to use for that.
Thank you. And for the, in your words, political questions, I'll defer those to Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I thank Liz for that commentary there. I will just say, when you talk about why North City South, we spent an awful lot of time looking at all of the options. Was it North City South? Was it East West? What was it? And the bottom line was that after all of the work, and I use the phrase again, the experts came back with an awful lot of detail. There were people in that room. It was split. People sitting there saying, no, I think it should be East West, and others say, I thought North South was a good idea, and ultimately North South and with the city won the day, but it won the day based upon the evidence that was put before us. It was not, just a sort of flight of fantasy that we decided to say, oh, well, we'll go with that. It was heavily based upon the information that we were provided with that enabled us to make that decision. And just to pick up on the one phrase, I said right at the start of this, I was very proud of the fact that people left politics at the door with this, because you had a room there that had got leaders from Labour, leaders from the Conservatives, and myself as a Liberal Democrat, representing an administration that is a coalition. And the basic bottom line was that politics were left at the door. This was all about trying to find the best way forward for not just ourselves, but also for the whole of Leicestershire. And that's how we ended up with this. There's an awful lot of hours of work have gone into it, and it was based upon, clearly, information we were provided with. A lot of it we asked questions, we sent it back, and it came back again and again and again. The patience our officers displayed was considerable, and I was very grateful to them because I'm sure they went home and we were all crossed off the Christmas card list more than once. I'm sure it was, it was deep and meaningful discussions. So it's not a decision that has been taken lightly. And I suppose if I've got to sum this up, this is the best worst option that actually keeps this as local as it possibly can to our communities. It's the best that we can do under the circumstances. The government in Westminster have made a decision. They've cast the die and said this is what we're going to do. We have to come up with something. Yes, we can criticise and say, well, have you thought about this, that, this? Everything's got to be looked at. Tonight, fantastic. We've had a tremendous amount of input, and I'm very, very grateful, Chairman, for all the input we've had. But I think at the end of the day, we have to look at this, quite coldly and say these decisions have been made and this document has been put forward based upon facts. And the fact is it's the best for our communities. And I hope that ultimately we will get support for North, City, South. I think it is vitally important that we deliver this for our communities. Absolutely agree with you about the rumours, the rumblings and everything that keep coming about, what's going to be absorbed, what might be absorbed, ambitions, etc. We can only deal with the facts, and the facts are very simple. We've said all along that we are protecting the boundaries of Harbour District in this, and we're doing just that. The city, we believe, is viable within its existing boundaries financially, so I think that's a point proven. And the fact that Rutland is in with the North, etc., again, is all based upon fact. It's all based upon evidence. We could have put all of the options, all of the discussions in to this document, but you'd probably have had about 700 or 800 pages, and then people saying, well, how are we supposed to take that on board? We've had to prepare a document that positively puts forward the alternatives, Chairman, and it actually delivers clear evidence that all of this is based upon very deep and meaningful considerations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. I would just add to that, though, that this is an independent panel, and obviously we're not here to drum up support or oppose the plans. We're simply here to scrutinise them. Councillor Bannister.
Thank you. Question for John or Clive. Reading through the report, I think it's page 62. It talks about asset realisation that could accrue something like 5.5 million if this option was going to be approved. And I was just wondering what assets have been identified, whether or not you can confirm that. John did mention a moment ago about future use of the Symington building. So I took from that there's the likelihood that the existing council buildings will remain. In that case, what thinking has there been in respect of a home building for the new authority to house not just the 70 councillors in the south, but all the supporting officers, directors and teams that will operate from that? And what sort of costings has been applied to that home building as and when it materialises? Thank you.
Through Chair. So no specific assets have actually been identified. So it's just an estimate at this point in time. So they've aggregated all the balance sheets. Okay. So the total balance sheet value is about $500 million, so it's 500 million. And they've taken a percentage of that, and they reckon about 75 million could be rationalised relatively straightforwardly, and it is shown in Appendix 2 at paragraph 3.9.6. In respect of specifically the TSB, as I say, no decision has been made. It's a multi-use hub. We've got the county here, we've got other agencies here as well. So, it's an interesting asset to want to dispose of, isn't it? But, it'll be a new organisation and they can decide what they wish to do. But my understanding is the intention is to have a site in each area, in each of the main towns. So, but it'd be up to the new authority for them to decide. But, you've got to remember this is a model, and that the asset rationalisation is based on empirical evidence from other reviews that have gone on. So there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just come back on that and invite John perhaps to make comment? So in which building will the 70 councillors meet?
Well, clearly that will be a decision for the new authority and the new elected members once they are elected in time. But yeah, clearly, you know, there's logic to this building. It's a multi-agency hub, as Clive's outlined. We have adult social care working out here. We have adult learning. We've got the museum. We've got the library. We've got a range of other uses in the building. So there's a lot of sense to this. And as Clive said, it would be a difficult asset to offload. So that would not be quick or easy. So there's certainly some logic around that. Perhaps Liz can talk about how you get to select a head office for a new authority from her experience, but clearly it will be in the gift of the new authority and the new members ultimately to decide it. But is there anything further you wanted to add, Liz, on that?
Just to say that when I was in Northants and a different structure, because we didn't have an election because of COVID, delivering LGR is difficult, but delivering COVID is really difficult. So I think when I was interim head of paid service there, I had over 150 councillors in my shadow authority, and finding a venue for that number of people was quite tricky. You're right in that actually most of our district council chambers are set up for 30, 40 councillors plus some public. When you start to step it up to 70 councillors, and you are pretty limited to where you can physically fit people in for your council meetings. Your exec meetings and your committee meetings can be dispersed and be across the districts or across the different locations, but you are quite limited. In Northants, we had to buy a particularly small desk for the Corby Cube. We have to use public galleries up above. You know, so instead of you having these nice big desks, you would probably have a very small, bit like Councillor Knight is sat at over the back there, with less space for you to work with. So it pretty much comes down to what assets you've got. But equally, in Andy's assumptions, he's assumed investment in assets. So we would rationalise some assets, we would keep some assets. But equally, if our assets that we've got are not fit for purpose, you would then look to say, well, they will be those ones that are surplus, and we will take that asset and reinvest in something that is fit for purpose, or to use it to make adaptations to those current assets that we own. So it is quite difficult, and it is one of the most difficult decisions that a new unitary council will make, apart from the logo that you will have to decide on of what your new unitary might have on all of its branding, where you have your head office, because, and you will experience this as you go through this, you will want to keep sovereign. You will want to say, well, Harbour needs to be, we're the best, we want it in ours. And Ode will say, no, we want it in ours is brand new. So there will be that, you will need to look at sense and what is the best option based on the assets you physically have. But we have made a commitment that every current district boundary will have a substantial community hub, a customer hub. It makes sense for this one because it is already multifunctional. It is already in the heart of Harbour. Whether there is a hub and spoke and satellite models and different ways of delivering that will be down to the target operating model and the way that services are delivered. And if we're going to a neighbourhood way of delivering services, you would expect there to be neighbourhood assets and neighbourhood community centres that public can access to as well. It is very much down to what you've got and how you can adapt it and what you can make it fit, but equally you can invest in where you want it to be. It's not an easy decision by any means, but it is, sometimes you have to be practical and pragmatic in those very early stages to where you can physically get all of councillors, all of the officers, all of that management team, all of the public, anybody else is interested in there as well. So yeah, hopefully that answers or gives you a little bit of insight into what the decisions might be coming for those shadow councillors.
That helps. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I guess that's me calling last orders on that then. So we will move on to recommendations. So I'll bring the debate to a close, and I believe, Lee, you've probably got a summary for me of some sort. So
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So just to confirm, you might notice me typing away when you've been asking questions. So all those questions that councillors are asking throughout this process across the authorities, we're capturing and sharing because they're then featuring into frequently asked questions to feed onto our websites and things, because inevitably, if you've got that thought, someone else might have that too. So all your questions are being captured. In terms of recommendations, the type of specific recommendations that we've picked up during the debate, I think there's about 6 that I've specifically captured. So I'll just name the councillor as well, so you can see where your bits fit in. Councillor King, I've got 3 elements from you. Firstly, it would be helpful to include more of the detail in relation to inflation that's currently in Appendix 2 into the main report. It'd be helpful for a table containing the breakdown of spend by council and anticipated deficit across constituent authorities to be in the report. And thirdly, it'd be helpful to include a clear explanation of the assumptions that have gone into the financial modelling. So are you happy they captured what you were suggesting?
Yeah, just on the second one, what I was thinking there is a kind of if we do nothing, so almost like, is it possible to have the grid that shows, well, if we did nothing, what would be the MTFS projections? And then if we do this, what does it look like? Because you've kind of got the what it looks like, I think, somewhere in Appendix 2, but what you haven't, I don't think we've got is what it looks like if we don't do it, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I said it'd be
Compare and
helpful.
contrast.
Oh.
they call
It'd be helpful for a table containing the breakdown of spend by council and anticipated deficit across constituent authorities, taking into account the MTFS projections if we did nothing within the report.
Just so we've got a better, clearer understanding of the,
The do nothing option.
yeah, the do nothing, yeah. I think it's really important to see that, yeah.
Okay. From the debate around Councillor Taylor's point, I think we'd reached the conclusion that the proposal should reference the climate impact as something we need to consider in the future.
So that's okay. I've got that we would put something into the narrative that recognise that the climate actions that we need to take would have a financial impact, but we can't model them at current because it's too detailed. But we would need to consider that there would be a financial implication of climate change. That's what I've got as my recommendation down there.
Yes, okay. I was shaking my head because it just sounded like it was something that could be sort of taken or left really, but it's just that the financial modelling that there must be models already out there. I mean, I've just, while we've been discussing it tonight, I've just been looking at it, and LSE is saying reduction in GDP by 3.3% by 2050 and 7.4% by 2020. So obviously those are huge figures. So there's something about, rather than just being.
Do you want to send me what you've just found, and then we can have a look, and what we'll make a commitment to is putting in a recommendation that climate impact is included further in the narrative, that the impact costings are considered. I don't know how much detail Andy will be able to do in that actual, but if we can have a look at what the average cost of climate impact might be, so that we can understand
something like that. I think it's
how
a bit like the point.
Yeah,
the point made about, well, how do we know if the populations are going to change? I think there must already be.
We can do some estimates of what the impact of climate change might be and the cost of that.
So that it's within that.
Might not necessarily be in the financial modelling, but we can definitely have a look at how we can estimate what those costs are, so that we can give an indicative feel of what that pressure might be, even though it's not built into the models.
Yeah, because that'd be costs that councils will have to pay.
So, they might choose to.
Yeah,
some councils may choose not to.
No, so, I suppose maybe that's what I was not saying. Where councils are choosing to plant lots of trees. I'm saying that these will be costs that, in terms of responding to flooding, wind damage, they will be costs that councils have to pay.
Yeah,
it's not going to be a choice.
So we'll look at how we can factor that in. I'm not sure how much detail there'll be, but if you want to send me what you found, we'll have a look at how we can factor that in. I'll perhaps speak to Helen Chadwick and see if she can do some wording around that. Thanks.
So I've just remodelled a recommendation whilst you've been talking there. So if possible, the report should include more information about the financial impact of climate change. And if not possible, the proposal should recognise this work has to be modelled, but it is too detailed to include at the proposals at this stage. So include if we can, and if we can't, we'll recognise that. Okay. And then from Councillor Scott, the report should include more detail in relation to the delivery model for adult social care and children's services. Yeah, I haven't got any other specific recommendations from what councillors saying. I think most of the others were questions, but obviously over to you, Chair, if you'd like to take some more.
I was asking about numbers of community and that's, but that needs to go in, I think.
Lou, I've got a couple of you, if that's okay, if I may through the chair.
please.
Okay, so I've got down, we need to look at the population growth to be included in the proposal and the financial model, so that we wanted to look at making sure we clarified whether those population growth was in the financial model or not.
Apologies, I've captured that as a question to be clarified after the meeting,
Okay, all right.
rather than a specific recommendation for changing the report, because we don't know the answer yet.
The other one that I've got is it sort of relates to what Councillor Wellborn was saying, was around actually how was that financial model chosen. I think that will be in the sensitivity analysis that Andy talked about, but we can ensure that the reasons why we've chosen that particular line on the graph rather than all of these other ones, and that scenario, that will be in the sensitivity analysis and why they've chosen that sort of median, mean, whatever, however they've done it. If we can have that as a clarification, then maybe not as a recommendation, that Andy clarifies how he's chosen the particular scenario in that. If we're in the sensitivity analysis, I'm pretty sure. And there, we've also got a recommendation, or I've got something written down to say that the key assumptions for the financial modelling should be in the table, either in the proposal or clearly in Appendix 2. Got that one? Perfect. And then the only other one that I've got was whether we needed to increase the risk around recruitment of scarce resources when it comes to professionals such as DCS and public health, etc., and 151s and MOs and all those other things as well. So perhaps that will go into our risk management section, and we can increase the risk around recruitment if we weren't successful.
Chair, through you. Is there going to be a full risk section of all the risks and analysis of the risks, how they've been offset as part of the final report?
Yeah, so I think there is a section in there around risks and risk analysis. There's a high level risk register. There will be further analysis, obviously, in the financial stuff around the financial risks and how that might mitigate out with those scenarios there. But there is risk analysis already in the proposal. If we feel that there's further risk analysis that would be beneficial, we can take that as a recommendation to enhance the current risk assessment in there. But we have done risk. We've also done equality impact as well as an appendix from those type of risks coming out that. But it could be that we take so there's financial risks are already in, but those wider risks, there is some in there, but whether if you think it needs enhancing.
Well, I was just going to ask, so when we get the final council report before it goes to cabinet, are we going to get all the appendices? I know there was a delay in some of those being populated. Are we going to get all those updated?
Yes, so those that weren't aren't currently on the website, those ones that when you open it up and it says to follow, yes, they will absolutely be available.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Grafton Reid, please.
Thank you. I was just to ask for a refinement of the request that Councillor Finnan's put in there. Request that we don't have just the change in population, but the demographic change.
Okay.
Okay, because that will influence the distribution of services.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's the first point.
I've written down the question to be answered as whether the financial modelling is taking account the population growth and demand growth over a 10-year period beyond 2028.
Okay, but I didn't hear the demand part, but the demographic data, I want to see the demographic data, if you would.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I mean, housing numbers as well would be quite interesting in terms of what the commitments are in the regions.
And so, if I may finish, and also the assumption based on the delivery of services by town councils and parish councils, and how that is going to be funded. and the assumption of their necessary growth to deliver the same services as we have today.
Yeah, so there isn't an assumption that that town and parish councils will deliver anything. That would be totally up to them whether they want to deliver that or not. So there's nothing built in that we assume they will. It is an offer for them to be included and to deliver should they want to. So there isn't any assumption that they will deliver anything in that.
Right, I think we would need to have that absolutely clear for so the public, because as it reads here, there is an assumption, and I want to make it clear because there is no resource there. And I don't believe it can be delivered at the moment. I have no faith in that model as it currently stands.
Okay. So we can put that as a question to be answered, I think, can't we?
We can. I mean, I do appreciate we have given the answer to the question that there isn't financial assumptions. And I'm not sure whether Councillor Grafton Reid is actually suggesting you'd like a report that's made a recommendation that's made more explicit within the report.
I am
Yeah.
asking that to be made more explicit.
Yeah.
And also to somehow describe how the reduction in services are going to be implemented.
Councillor Bannister.
I know it's inferred in the reports and the appendices, but I was just wondering, for the sake of absolute clarity, what the position will be for the existing councillors up until the vesting date on the 1st of April 2028, so that it is clear that there will be an expectation that district council elections will not be taking place in May 2027 because of the expectation of elections to the shadow authority, and therefore councillors that were elected in 2023 will be expected to continue in their office until the 1st of April 2028.
So that will depend on what's in the structural changes order, and that the Secretary of State will need to decide to cancel the district elections.
Yes.
And that will be part of the secondary legislation that goes through. We can put in this, we will assume that this is what will happen, and that councillors would be expected, if the Secretary of State cancels those elections, to extend their term of office by 1 year. The other thing that the structural changes order will do is give clarity about if there is a vacancy 6 months prior to the vesting date, etc., it won't be filled, and those type of things. So there will be a lot of detail in the structural changes order about how that election will be extended or cancelled, etc. But we can put something in, but it can only be an assumption because we can't second guess what the Secretary of State will put through the secondary legislation. It is likely they will do that, but we perhaps just need to word it in a way that we can't say definitely you will be expected to until such time as that primary.
I think it may be helpful for existing councillors to know what their position will
so
be.
They're likely to have to do another year. They may choose, but that's too much for them, and before 6 months there could be vacancies. Yeah, okay.
I'll bring in Councillor Mills and I'll come to you, Councillor Scott.
Chairman, there is another thing as well, obviously, that we have no idea, and again, we're in the hands of the government on this, exactly when and if the powers that currently rest with Harbour District Council will continue, be curtailed, or what will happen. We're very, very much in the government's hands, because they may well make decisions in, I don't know, 12, 14, 16 weeks time that says, okay, you've got your budget sorted out now, and that's it. You can't spend more than this, or you can't do more than that. We really are in some very uncertain times as to exactly what it will mean. And until the government come forward and tell us what it means, it's all speculation. But I think it is fair to say it's very, very uncertain times ahead as to exactly what we will be able to do going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Scott.
In relation to Councillor Bannister and Councillor Grafton Reid's comments, particularly about parish councils, I'm parish councillor myself. With the delay of elections, some parish councils may well have to hold standalone elections. They aren't.
So this structural changes order will cancel the district and parish elections, and the parish elections will then go in line, won't they?
It's a fundamental assumption we're making at the moment, but the proposal is that the district elections would be cancelled, but the parish and town ones might stay as they are. We don't absolutely know that yet. I know that it does have some impacts because parish and towns might have to share a bigger amount of cost, but don't forget that what we'd instead see is shadow authority and mayor elections, the combined authorities instead, and then they would turn to a 4-year cycle, and therefore the parishes won't be affected in the long term if they stay on the same cycle. So it's potentially in the parish's interest to still go ahead in 2027 and not be cancelled just because districts are.
Yeah.
But this is all
So maybe
assumptions.
possibly.
Yeah, so it would depend on what the structural changes order, but what it would like normally does is align the parish councils back to those unitary council elections on that 4-year cycle. And it depends on, obviously, if we've got, who knows, in Northamptonshire, we plan to do our shadow elections. And as I say, COVID came in and we had to do our elections in May of the year of vesting. So we created in April 21 and we elected in May 21. So we can't say definitely what will happen, but it will be in the structural changes order of how it
I'm
affects.
just concerned that parish councils may well have to be looking
Yeah.
at £12,000, £15,000 in their
The
budgets
cost will be
to hold.
mitigated as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add one further bit to that, if just there was a scenario where, for example, the shadow authority election slipped year to 2028 and their 4-year term starts from that point, the new unitary could use a community governance review to shift the parishes back in line with the shadow authorities again. So there are lots of options once you get through it.
Good answer, thank you.
So we obviously had the initial recommendations. We have supplementary recommendations. Did you want to just go through the supplementary recommendations?
Yes, so I finished with Councillor Scott one. So picking up on Councillor Wellband's point, ensure that the reasons for why the financial model was included in the report is clear and aligned to the sensitivity analysis. To consider whether we need to increase the risk around recruitment of specialised professionals in the risk management section of the report. To ensure it's clear within the report that there are no financial assumptions regarding town and parish delivery within the report and no presumptions made that they will be delivering services. That the report makes clear there is an assumption that existing councillors will be expected to serve a further year on their election term and district elections 2027 will be cancelled. Chairman, if I may, I think the intention is that these recommendations we will table for council alongside the report that will go to council. At the council meeting, the council itself can decide whether or not to adopt and support these recommendations. And obviously at council, you'll then have the chance to make further recommendations through submitting proposals on the night as to further things you would like to do, whether you might want to support things or not. The options are open to you at the council meeting.
Okay, so unless anybody says otherwise, I think we have a consensus on the recommendations as they are. So we don't need to vote on that necessarily, do we? Unless there's any objections, of course, probably easy to do it that way. No? Okay, okay, I'm happy for that to pass through then. So that takes us to item 5. Any urgent business? I'm not aware of any urgent business. And that makes the time 20:49, and therefore I bring this meeting to a close.